Justamente esta mañana platiqué con John Shipton, padre de Julian Assange, y Gabriel Shipton, hermano de Julian Assange. Esto fue lo que nos contaron. John, Gabriel, thanks a lot for your time. It's an honor for me to have you here.
Thank you.
John, we know you're living the most difficult and challenging days since Julian was arrested and taken into prison. Why do you think Julian is being punished instead of winning a Pulitzer Prize for showing to the world the most cruel face of Iraq and Afghanistan war?
Well, I think the answer is in your question, because Julian exposed war crimes, and particularly everybody has seen collateral murder. In that, there are 3 war crimes which remain unpunished to this day. 20 million people have seen that. They also understand that 15,000 civilians are revealed to have been killed in the Iraq war files. In the Afghan war files, a similar circumstance of targeting of wedding parties and funeral corteges. So these crimes that people have committed and Julian exposed, the people who commit the crimes move to oppress or intimidate or ruin Julian. Rather than face court, they face the destruction of Julian Assange if they can.
Gabriel, how do you describe your father's struggle to bring his son back home, and of course your family and your own fight?
Well, I describe it as the fight for freedom of our lifetime. There's no bigger cause that speaks to freedom of communication, to freedom of speech than Julian's. He's emblematic of these things, and the worldwide support just goes to show that that people understand the consequences of this fight. We've got parliaments all around the world have Julian Assange groups in them. So in the Bundestag, there's 90 parliamentarians who are calling for Julian's freedom. In Australia, 41 parliamentarians. Every single country in Europe. France has 49. Greece, there's half of the parliament. These parliamentarians and politicians represent millions and millions of people. So this is the fight, and I think it is the fight for freedom of speech, freedom of communication of our lifetime.
John, where is Julian living at Belmarsh prison? How is he emotionally and psychologically?
Well, it's a maximum security prison. Julian is a publisher. It's a maximum security prison to hold terrorists and murderers. So that circumstance in itself. But also Julian is held incommunicado. That is, that he's not allowed to make public utterances. He can't speak publicly. So we must, of course, speak for him. Psychologically, Julian was not extradited. The decision of Judge Baritza on January 4th last year was not to extradite Julian because of the circumstances in prisons in the United States would result in Julian's death. So that is a considerable psychological burden for Julian to carry day in, day out, year in, year out. Now we are in the 13th year of this arbitrary detention.
Gabriel, let's talk about Ithaca. What does the documentary Ithaca shows?
Ithaca really shows the personal side to this fight, the sort of behind the scenes emotional journey of 2 people who are at the centre of this fight for press freedom, for freedom of communication, and the day-to-day grind and really what it takes to fight for a cause bigger than yourself. We get to sort of see behind the scenes and understand Julian in a different way, not through the headlines, not through the press that we're all used to, but through the people who love him most. So it's very much an emotional an emotional story, a father's fight for his son, a story that anybody can connect with, because who wouldn't do anything for their children.
And what is the main purpose of bringing it to the world?
I think we want to get our side of the story out, to communicate to people everywhere, what this really means, and telling it in an emotional way sort of allows us to present it to a broader audience, people who might not be interested in these sort of things, but they'll connect with the story on an emotional level. So it's really getting our side of the story out. We sort of rely on the media all the time to tell our story, but this is something that we've created personally. Like it is from the heart, from definitely our family's perspective.
John, what do you fear the most of a possible extradition of Julian Assange to the US? Do you trust in American justice?
What we fear the most is that Julian will die in prison. And I think that's the intention of the Department of Justice and the State Department, that Julian die in prison, to exemplify to all journalists and publishers that this is what will happen to you should you publish things that we don't want you to publish. And that intimidation you can see right around the world. Your president, Lopez Obrador, is rare and courageous as a president of Mexico speaking out in defense of Julian Assange. He is the first sitting president to do so. He is followed by the Prime Minister of Australia, who made a similar statement.
What is happening to Julian is a clear warning for journalists around the world. How his case impacts freedom of speech and, of course, the right to be informed.
It is it's a global problem. We all recognize that. With every circumstance in where people, journalists or publishers, wish to publish what governments do behind closed doors, what policies are formed behind closed doors, and how those policies are enacted. This, if you publish this, then you will be oppressed and intimidated, and finally, if they get their way, you'll end up dying in jail. However, with the assistance of courageous men like President Obrador and the Prime Minister of Australia, we will, and all of the people, of course, who assist us, the activists around the world, we will prevail over the intentions of the State Department and the Department of Justice of the United States.
Gabriel, talking about press, what is the role journalism has played or should play in the prosecution of Assange's journalistic activity?
Well, journalists all around the world should be speaking up in defense of Julian. What's that?
But we are?
Yeah, I think, for many years, the corporate media, the legacy media, saw it as convenient to demonize Julian and mob Julian. And that led, WikiLeaks sort of was WikiLeaks threatened the business model of the corporate and legacy media. So for a very long time, they saw it as convenient to demonize Julian, and that served the powers that were attacking him. They wanted to shift the spotlight from their crimes, from their war crimes, from their corruption, onto Julian. And so the press, the legacy media and the corporate media assisted in that process. But since 2019, since this unprecedented Espionage Act prosecution, 17 charges, if you read the indictment, which many newspapers have now, it is for exactly what journalists do every day, sourcing and publishing information that the government doesn't want the public to know. And so now journalists everywhere, I think, have slowly coming around. You know, it's like turning around a huge ship. It happens slowly, but it does happen. And so you see the newspapers in the UK, like The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Times, all speaking out saying that Julian shouldn't be extradited. The executive editors of the Washington Post making comments saying this is a threat to press freedom, a threat to the First Amendment. Same with the New York Times, the New York Post. So journalists everywhere, you know, are coming around slowly, and I think they need to keep doing more. And you know, there are a lot of courageous journalists out there who keep bringing this up over and time again. And I think that's what's really needed in this case, is a real effort from the press. You know, this threatens them. And if they can do it to Julian, it can happen to them. And so they need to speak up and speak loudly.
John, at this point, do you think we journalists and mass media have forgotten Assange and therefore resigned to our commitment to inform?
Most of the corporate media has to respond to circumstances outside of informing the public. So you could, in this circumstance, you can divide the media into three: legacy media, alternative media, and social media. Our support base mostly exists in social media. So each journalist, each day, checks Twitter and sees what's generating newsworthy on Twitter. And this that they'll take into the corporate offices and see if the editors allow this to run. That's their circumstance. However, as Gabriel points out, the realization that what has happened to Julian can happen to any publisher, anywhere, even the New York Times. As a consequence of that, they've seen fit to give support to Julian Assange and to publish, well, the circumstances of Julian's indictment and the possibility that Julian may die in jail.
And what about society? We have done enough.
Society, look, we are millions of people around the world, everywhere we go. Even in the United States last year, we toured 15 cities. In every city, we had a very strong reception. In the United States, we were able to meet members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. So the circumstances of in Julian's indictment affecting the truncation or repression of the First Amendment. The First Amendment, if I could say so here, the First Amendment is that we, on the outside of the United States, see as their finest civil artifact.
I'm almost done. Gabriel, do you think President López Obrador can make a difference in Julian Assange case or process, and how?
Yes, I certainly do. I think, you know, just from President López Obrador speaking out, this echoes all around the world. You know, every time he speaks out for Julian, it's reported in newspapers in London, in New York, in Sydney, in Australia. So just him speaking has an effect all around the world and gives protection to other leaders. You know, they don't have to, you know, he is the leader and others can fall behind him. So I think that's what we've seen, you know, around the world with other leaders in Latin America, with the Australian Prime Minister. You know, these leaders are no longer scared to speak out. They're no longer afraid because of President López Obrador's courageous statements in confronting the US on this, you know, threat to journalism everywhere.
John, I can't finish this interview without asking you about journalism in Mexico. What do you think about what journalists are facing? Real danger, very, very poor salaries, no guarantees, no protection, no justice. 15 of us has been killed only this year.
It's a great tragedy, that's what I think. However, using Julian Assange as emblematic of attacks on journalists, President López Obrador has pointing out to the society that this can go no further. I think that is a substantial contribution to the safety and prestige of journalists in Mexico and journalists around the world.
Do you want to share a last statement?
I just thank the people of Mexico. I think, just thank you to the people of Mexico. We've been received so warmly, and it's been very good reception here. Thank you.
John?
Well, what can I add? You know, when we leave here next week, after the independence celebrations, we will leave behind our hearts and take with us a new knowledge and new enthusiasm to continue the fight to free Julian. So we say a heartfelt thank you.
John, Gabriel, thanks again a lot for your time.
Thanks.
Tras finalizar este encuentro, el padre de Julian Assange, John Shipton, aseguró que será hasta el próximo año, a principios de 2023, cuando podamos saber si finalmente ocurre o no la extradición de Julian Assange desde Londres, Inglaterra, hasta Estados Unidos, y reconoció que, de ser así, el riesgo de suicidio por parte de Julian Assange es real.